Good day, everybody, and welcome to my new episode on the living in Malaysia property basics. And today, I'm going to cover a topic that I have been getting from a lot of the feedback recently. Some of the questions that we get are about buying property in Malaysia, but we also get a lot of questions about I want to retire in Malaysia. How do I go about this? Or I want to live in Malaysia, work in Singapore. How do I go about this? Or I want to spend some portion of my life or my time in Johor Bahru. How do I do this? And these are questions that come from a lot of people in Singapore, which I think is a trend nowadays, especially look at this article, right? This article just came out in the Straits Times recently, where you can see an influencer. She just moved to Johor Bahru recently with a family. I don't know who she is. This is the first time I've heard of her, right? I don't know her. I don't know her in person, but I'll go and follow her social media after this. And she's moved to JB to escape the high cost of rental in Singapore, to get better quality of life, and so they have chosen to rent a place in Johor Bahru. So I think this is a quite common trend. We are seeing this quite a fair bit in Singapore today because cost of living in Singapore has gone up quite a fair bit. There's inflation, so a lot of people are looking at options that they have, and one of the options is, of course, to live in Johor Bahru. So in today's video, I'm going to try and answer that question, the various different perspectives of how to approach this issue of retiring in Johor Bahru or having a life in Johor Bahru while still being connected to Singapore. So the first thing is who is the most suitable for this purpose, okay? To live in Johor, right? Number one, of course, are the retirees, because when you're retired, your schedule is not fixed. You have a lot of free time. You can control when you enter Johor, when you enter Singapore, how much time you spend there. So of course, retirees is the most obvious choice. And of course, for retirees, you want to reduce your cost of living a lot, right, in your retirement age, right? Second are the type of people who work from home, right? If you can work from home, or you only need to enter office maybe once or twice a week, or even once or twice a month, even better, right? I think there are still some professions out there where you can work from home quite a fair bit. So if you can work from home, I think living in Johor is also a very good option, right? Especially for people in IT. We realize this is the use case. Some people in customer service, some people in who run their own business online, right? Like in the article earlier, right? Those people who can work from home, definitely living in Johor is one option. So the other group is people who have their own business, right? When you run your own business, definitely you have flexible hours. You can enter Singapore, Johor whenever you want. You have more control over the time that you spend in your business, right? Especially if you're not involved in day-to-day operations. The fourth group also are people who have flexible hours. So when we say flexible hours, normally means that they can go to work like 7 a.m., 8 a.m., right, and leave the office at like 3 p.m., 4 p.m., right? Normally, these are people who are in the frontline service, like for example, nurse. Some people work at airports, right? They have certain shifts, right, where they can control the timing, and because they can control the flexible hours, then they can avoid a lot of the traffic issues that we have today, right? And so for these people staying in Johor, in JB is of course a very good option for them as well. So let's handle the first issue, with actually the legal requirement or the visas, right? So how are you going to stay in Malaysia? What kind of visa or permit do you have to stay in a foreign country, right? If you're Singaporean or some other nationality based out of Singapore, if you want to stay in Johor, how is that going to work from a legal perspective? So first of all, the most common advice is the Malaysia My Second Home, right? If you can apply for the Malaysia My Second Home, right, then definitely you can live in Malaysia for a long period without any concerns. Of course, I have done a video on this. You can look at my other video about the different type of visas to live in Johor, right? I think in there I covered Malaysia My Second Home. I also covered the education visa, employment passes, the digital nomad, as well as the standard 30-day tourist visa, right? So if you want, you can watch my video on that. I will link it in the description below, okay, about the different type of visas to live in Malaysia. So Malaysia My Second Home is of course the most obvious one. But today, a lot of people are using the 30-day tourist visa, right? As in being an ASEAN country member, right? Singapore and Malaysia both are part of ASEAN. So they grant each other 30-day tourist visa. So you can enter Malaysia for as long up to 30 days without overstaying. So obviously, most people are not going to stay for 30 days one shot, right? Most people will in out of Singapore quite a fair bit. So if you can in out of Singapore within the 30-day period, I think generally this is what people do. Some people ask me, is this legal? Now the point is, it's not illegal. There's nowhere to say that you cannot do this. But of course, it does in a sense of the word, we are not we are somewhat abusing a little bit this tourist visa because it was meant to be for tourism purpose rather than second home scenario case, right? So that's why sometimes in Malaysia immigration you may hear stories that Malaysia immigration may not like people who are in out of Johor too much, especially if you're doing daily travel or you spend a lot more time in Malaysia than in Singapore. I think we have had scenarios where people get questioned, but question only, no one so far get U-turn as far as we can see. Question why you spend so much time in Malaysia, all that, right? So I think it's not a big problem if you can justify the reason why you enter Malaysia so much. I think in most cases, immigration officer actually, I think in 99% of the cases, immigration officer cannot do anything to you, right? But again, I want to stress this is the worst case scenario, right? And again, thousands of people, I'm sure, are doing this every day, in and out of Johor, right, using the 30-day tourism visa. So I would suggest you use this, right? It's the simplest method to try, right? You don't have to do anything or apply anything. The tourism visa works for you. But otherwise, if you have other situations, right, where you're opening a business or you have children studying in Johor, right, do check out my other video about the different type of visas to live in Singapore, in Johor, right, and see if any of them are applicable for you there. Next topic we're going to talk about is basically travel. Now, as you know, cross-border travel between Johor and Singapore can be a pain, right? It can take hours if you travel at the wrong time, right? And even if you're in Johor, how are you going to get about, right? So definitely cross-border travel. Let's talk about cross-border travel first, right? You can use private car, whether private car or private motorcycle, right? Depending on if you have these options in Singapore, you have a car in Singapore or a motorbike in Singapore, you can travel, right? Do try to avoid peak periods, right? Peak periods means going on weekdays, going into Singapore is heavy, right? Because Malaysians go to Singapore in the morning to work, right? And it'll be peak again when Malaysians go back to Malaysia in the evening, right? Peak on weekdays. On the weekends, it's the opposite, right? All the Singaporeans are coming to Johor on the weekend. So during the morning is peak. And on Sunday evening, when they go back to Singapore, that is peak. So generally speaking, these are the common peak periods that you need to be aware of. And you also have to take note that public holidays in Singapore and Malaysia, right? These are they affect travel as well. Like for example, last weekend, at the time of this video, Singapore was a long weekend because of Wesak Day, right? So that was a massive jam on Friday because Friday was holiday. So these things affect as well as stuff such as school holidays, right? Whether Malaysia school holiday or Singapore school holiday, this also affects travel as well. Similarly, you should pay attention to Malaysian public holidays as well. They do have some impact to cross-border travel. But you may not be able to catch everything, right? I mean, not everybody looks at calendar every day to decide before you travel. But yeah, travel is an issue. You can always take public transportation, whether by bus, right? Bus is of course an easy way. Actually, if it's off peak, right? Off peak period, like entering JB on the lunchtime onwards, right? The by bus can be quite fast, maybe 1.5 hours all in, because there's less people, right? And the bus can be quite fast because the bus have their own bus lane, right? So these are some things to consider. If you can travel off peak, actually today the bus travel is not that bad lah. Peak then very bad, right? But off peak, you sit bus can be quite fine. Another option is the KTM, right? Today there's an existing KTM train, right? KTM refers to the old train, right, between Woodlands to JB, right? There is such a train today. The train is very old. It's roughly about 1 hour one trip, right? The tickets are sold online and they sell out very very fast. You have to try and buy the tickets like 1 week in advance, right, to get the tickets. And sometimes there's a bit of a who can click fast online, you get the ticket, right? So, and maybe ticket for the peak periods are often very difficult to get, right? If you can travel off peak again, KTM tickets are quite good. Of course, KTM is very fast. The train is very fast, right? It's something like giving an idea what MRT is, right? And of course, we're looking forward to the MRT that's coming in 3 years from now. So if you watch my other videos or in my channel already, you will know that Singapore and Malaysia are building an MRT between Woodlands to JB, which is currently under construction and will complete in 2026. That will be a game changer, right? And I think 3 years from now, we will see a lot of people prefer to use the MRT than other forms of transport, right? Including myself. So that's for cross-border travel. Now, internal travel, I would suggest if you can drive to buy a Malaysian car, right? Malaysian cars are not expensive, right? They are very cheap compared to Singapore. I mean, you can buy a second-hand car. It doesn't have to be new, right? And reasonably good condition. In fact, the cost of maintaining a car is also a lot cheaper in Malaysia, right? I know cars in Singapore are expensive. If you can get that out of your mind, that to own a car in Malaysia, you can buy a car in Malaysia and use that car to get around. I think Malaysia is still a country where travel by private car is quite common. So I would suggest you get a car lah. If you really cannot drive, then of course you stay in areas where walking is easy lah, right? But if you can drive, I suggest you get a car, right? If you cannot drive, then there are of course taxis and Grab. Right, I suggest to use Grab because Grab is definitely cheaper than taxi, right? And of course, Grab you can use an app and everything to book, so it's quite convenient. So Grab is not expensive in Malaysia, definitely cheaper than Singapore Grab, right? And you can get around to most places in Malaysia using Grab, right? Then again, Grab is not necessarily cheap lah. If you use it every day, multiple times, then I think Grab not cheap lah. but I mean, if you use it just for one-off travel here and there, in a week, maybe a couple of times, I think for Grab, I think that's fine. It's very affordable for what it is, right? So yeah, so use Grab if you can't drive, right, and you need a car to get around somewhere. Okay. Next is the general cost of living. Now, we all know that cost of living in Singapore is high, and cost of living in Malaysia definitely is cheaper. It's very difficult to quantify in a video like this how much cheaper it will be. Everybody has a slightly different lifestyle. I did do a video, which I will link in the description below, also about 10 things in Malaysia that are cheaper than Singapore, right? These are the 10 things to me that most people ask, right? If you're quite uncertain about this, go and watch that video around the 10 things which I think are a lot, which most people ask about cheaper cost in Malaysia. We talk about food, car, groceries, everything. I talk about that in that video. So if you want more details, go and watch that video, right? But generally speaking, if you were to estimate a cost or a budget per person, I would say 1,000 Sing per person is more than enough, right? In my opinion, I could be wrong. Again, there could be some variation, but 1,000 Sing per month per person is more than enough to cover things like food, utility, transport, services that you need, right? I think 1,000 Sing per person per month, enough, quite a lot, and you can live fairly comfortably already, right? And we talk about average spending, like we don't talk about everyday go 5-star restaurant, right? But for normal lifestyle, I think 1,000 Sing per month per person to cover everything, maybe excluding rent. We don't talk about rent, we treat rent and property cost separately. Everything other than rent, 1,000 Sing per month is more than enough to live in Malaysia. So we come to the next point, which is housing. So you say, if how much does housing cost? Now, again, buying is a whole different topic altogether, right? Which I will not talk into detail in this video. But I would suggest if it's your first time going to Malaysia, to live in Malaysia, and you're trying it out, right, you can always rent first, right? Rent is a option which I think is easy, right? Leases in Malaysia are typically 1 year, so you do have to rent for a minimum of 1 year. There are shorter leases like 3 months or 6 months, but then what happens is that the rent go up a lot. You might as well just rent 1 year if you ask me, right? But unless you really don't want that, but you can rent 6 months if you want to try a place. But renting gives you an option that in case you don't like the place or you find out that Malaysia is not for you, you can always break lease, worst case, or return the property after lease and go back. So renting is an easy option without having to buy, right? As much as I'm a property agent, I sell property in Singapore and Johor, right? But I don't suggest you buy if you are quite new to this concept about living in Malaysia, right? You can rent first, renting is fine, right? So like I said, 1 year, this is the norm. You don't have to rent 2 years. Singapore 2 years is more common, but Malaysia 1 year is normal, right? And you normally have to pay a deposit of about 2 months, 2 months rental plus half month for utilities deposit, right? Water, electricity. So in all, you should consider 2.5 months deposits with your landlord, right? Of course, the 1 more month for the first month rent, so you can pay 3.5 months for a rental situation, right? And of course, the deposits are refundable at the end of the lease, right? Minus any repairs and cleaning. So it works similar to Singapore in that sense, right? So if you find that you don't want to commit too much, rental is a good option. So how much will rentals cost? Depending on where you stay. If you stay to city center, I mean, a 1 bedroom condo should be around 2,000 to 2,000 plus ringgit a month. If you stay further away, it can be 1,000 to 1,005 a month, depending on location, right? So maybe I'll list some prices next to here to give you some idea what rents should be like in the city center versus the suburbs. Do take note that prices may vary again depending on project and unit, right? But this should give you a rough idea of how much rentals are. And rentals are cheap, right? So take advantage. Even though rentals in Malaysia have gone up quite a fair bit ever since border open, they are still a lot cheaper than Singapore. So do take advantage if you want to try out a retiring in Johor lifestyle. Okay, next one is security. People ask me, is it safe to stay in Johor, right, or stay in Malaysia? Now, I can tell you this security thing is overblown. Yeah, I mean, if people still tell me that JB is dangerous in this day and age, I would suggest they are reading news from another era, right, from 20 years ago or 30 years ago kind of scenario. JB is as safe as a city can be in Malaysia, right? I don't think it's any more dangerous than any other city in Malaysia. There's this perception. I think I don't know where this perception come from. Of course, everything compared to Singapore, Singapore's safe, right? Anything compared to Singapore is dangerous, right? Anything other than Singapore is dangerous, right? How many cities in the world can you say are safer than Singapore, right? I suspect that every Singaporean that goes to Italy or France get more rob case in there rather compared to JB, right? But of course, everything in JB get overblown because we are so nearby, right? It gets amplified by the media. One case happened in Malaysia, then the whole world in Singapore knows, right? That's the problem. But of course, if you stay in Johor, right, just be more mindful of your surroundings. I think a lot of people in Singapore are too comfortable, right? So they forget about this kind of things, right? Like don't leave your money on the table, right? Or leave your expensive handbag on your car dashboard, right? This you are inviting trouble, right? If you do this kind of things, right? Especially if you had the unlucky, bad timing, wrong place, right? But by and large, like I said, Johor is a very safe place, right? I think police take serious crime very seriously, right? You don't hear about murders or things like that, right? It's very, very uncommon, right? Or theft, right? And if they do, normally they can be caught quite easily. And again, like I said, Malaysia is a median of any other country in the world. I don't think is safer or less safe than most places. So don't let the security thing stop you. Go and try it out, right? I think a lot of people who've been to JB, thousands of people go to JB every day, don't face any safety issue at all. Next is medical, right? So how about healthcare, right? Things like private clinics. Now, if you are a foreigner in Malaysia, right, I suggest you go to private clinic or private hospital. Don't go to government clinic, because government clinic the queues are very long, just like just like Singapore, right? So government services are of course cheaper, but queue very long. And as a Singaporean, it's better for you to go to a private clinic because you don't enjoy subsidies anyway as a foreigner. So you might as well go to private clinic. So private clinic in Malaysia, a typical visit will cost you anywhere from 60 to 100 ringgit, right, including medication. So there's a lot cheaper than Singapore. Singapore private clinic cheaper. Cheaper than Singapore private clinic, right? And of course, the other thing is the queues are not as long, right? I don't know why Singapore private clinic queue are very long ones. So if you're talking about day-to-day issues like flu, fever, right? Cough, basic stuff, just go to any Malaysia private clinic. And like what one client said, I mean, it's all about the doctor. You ask me doctor good or not, I think this is very subjective depending on the doctor that you run into, right? There are good doctors, there are bad doctors, right? You just go around and find something that you like, right? And you're comfortable with, and that will solve everything, right? You have to try around, right? I can't recommend for you exactly which clinic or is the best, right? Do go around. Same thing with dental, right? Dental costs in Malaysia like half of Singapore prices. You save a lot of money in dental, right? And the other thing is, if you do run into more serious cases, you can always go to hospitals. We have a Gleneagles and a lot of Singapore-run hospitals in Johor, right? You can use Medisafe if you can pre-plan the trip, right? Medisafe is a lot of cost, and it depends on your insurance coverage. If whether insurance coverage covers overseas treatments, yeah, you can use your insurance there as well. So medical, I think Malaysia has a very high medical rating globally, right? Can go and check it out if you don't believe me, right? Lots of people, even Indonesian and other nationality, come to Malaysia for our healthcare, right? So it's a lot of value for money and can be found quite easily. Next one is internet connectivity. Now in Malaysia, you can get we have broadband Wi-Fi, right? Not as fast as Singapore. We are a bit behind on the 5G thing, but 5G is being rolled out right now. You should get progressively faster internet over to 2024 and 2025 as 5G gets rolled out. The main service providers are Unify, Maxis, and Time, right? I think of all of them, Unify is the best and also the best value for money, right? You can probably get reasonably high internet service for about maybe 100, 200 ringgit a month, right? Of course, you can pay more, get faster, right? But in some places, you may only get access to Time or Maxis, which are not bad, but I mean, if you ask me, Unify is better, right? So again, high-speed internet is there, very important for people who work from home. Of course, Malaysia as a country, internet is important, right? And yeah, so internet connectivity typically not a problem. All condos and landed property generally have access to Wi-Fi. Don't worry about that. Just get a service provider, either one of these, TM, Unify, Maxis, or Time. They'll have a technician come and do the whole thing for you, no problem. And they normally have contracts about 12 months to 24 months, which you are tied in, right? Yeah, same to Singapore, right? So it's not very different there. Last, about working in Malaysia. part-time if you want to, doing business, and how about things like banking, right? How do you get around your banking services in Malaysia? So if you want to work part-time in Malaysia, then the issues of course are employment passes, right? Whether you can get employment pass from employer or not. Typically they won't give you, like, I guess if you're working part-time, you're not worth the employment pass, right? You may work like sort of semi-legally, right, where they pay you per hour cash without any formal declaration. That's another way, right? You can always open a business. Opening a company in Malaysia is not expensive. It costs about 4 or 5,000 ringgit to open one. Annual costs are also about the same, 4 or 5,000 ringgit for the audit and the taxes, tax checks and the accounting, right? Also about 4 or 5,000 ringgit a year, right? Company secretary fees, all that. So those are the annual costs for a company. And with a company, you can attempt to apply for employment pass for yourself. But I would suggest if you're going to do a business in Malaysia, you have to be a bit serious about it. Don't do those business like, not here, not there, or just for purposes of employment pass. I think that is not worth it, right? You better have a business that you have serious intention to do business, right? To me, doing a business in Malaysia is good if you can manufacture in Malaysia and sell in Singapore. I think that's the best way, right? You manufacture in ringgit, sell in Singapore dollar, right? That's the best. I think a lot of people make money through this, even in Singapore today, right? You'll be surprised how many businesses, even supermarket, right, buy stuff from Malaysia, sell Singapore. Right? It's the most basic thing, right? The most basic way to make money. So I think if you can do the kind of model, I think it's the best, right, way to do a business in Malaysia, right? So company secretary will handle all the paperwork for you. So just, if you need one, you can let me know. I can recommend you some company secretary if you want to do this, right? Next we talk about banking. So now you probably, it's good to have a Malaysian bank account if you want to live in Malaysia. The problem is if you are running on a tourist visa, I don't think any Malaysian bank will just simply open a bank account for you. So that is generally the issue. You can try to ask like Singapore banks like UOB, OCBC, CIMB, those are who are present in Singapore, Maybank, whether they have some special arrangement for you to open a bank account in Malaysia. It has been done before. I have seen it happen, but I'm not sure whether such schemes are openly available every time. You can try it out with your own bank if you want to. Right. Alternatively, if you buy a property in Malaysia, typically, and you buy property in Malaysia and the bank will allow you to open an account, right? Or if you take a bank loan, right, to buy that property, that bank will grant you an account. So that's the most common way most Singaporeans get in a Malaysian bank account, right, through buying a property in Malaysia. Or if you have MM2H or some other visa, like a employment visa or employment pass or a education pass, then you can also open bank account. A proper visa to live, other than tourist visa, right? So then you can get a bank account in Malaysia, right, to operate with, and of course apply internet banking. Internet banking does a lot of wonders for you to pay all the different bills in life. So get internet banking, right? Don't say you're old and don't understand all this, right? Internet banking is important, right? Young or old, everybody must need to use some internet banking today, right? And the other thing that I will also want to recommend is get an e-wallet, right? E-wallet is something like Touch and Go and Wallet. They are very useful, right? Today also in Malaysia, it's quite common to pay stuff, right, using things like e-wallet. We also have our version of PayNow. So in Singapore, you have PayNow, PayLah, right? In Malaysia, it's called Do It Now. Do It as in DUIT. Do It is the Malay word for money, right? So do it, and it's also a play of the word do it, right? So do it now. So do it now is the Malaysian version of PayNow. So you can use this to a lot of places accept Do It Now or Touch and Go e-wallet. So you can use that to pay bills as well. That will allow you a lot of flexibility in how you pay stuff on your day-to-day going around in Malaysia. Okay, so I hope with that video I've clarified quite a fair bit about how to approach this problem about issue about living in Malaysia. As I said, if you are young or if you're retiring, go and try it out. I mean, what's there to stop you, right? If you want to complain a lot about Singapore high cost of living, right? Then I mean, I'm giving you an option here, right? A lot of people are looking at Malaysia today, and as per the article earlier, right, you can see lots of people are doing it in Johor today, right? If you want to be, you can go and try it out, right? See whether you can save money or not. A bit of adventure in your life, living in a different country. It's not that different, right? Malaysia and Singapore are quite similar, but I mean, if you want something that's fairly low risk, nearby, and easy to turn back to, Johor is a good place. I would recommend anybody who's looking at it or watching my video. If you're watching my video, means you have some intention or thought about it already. So give it do try it out. Like I said, 1 year lease, what's the harm? Worst case, you just go back to Singapore, right? If you on the best case, you will enjoy a much different lifestyle, a much better quality of life, save some money, or at least, like I said, much better quality of life for the same amount of money, right? And I think that's what we all aspire to. And yeah, if you do like this video, please subscribe, like, share, and subscribe. Do leave a comment below if you enjoy my content or if you have any questions. Please share with your friends as well. We are on TikTok, we are on YouTube, we are on Facebook as well. We have an email list. You can sign up on my email mailing list below as well, where you can get updates via email about our future events. We do run events in Singapore quite a fair bit to talk about property, Malaysia, living in Malaysia. Do try attend us, meet me live. If anything, you can always drop me an email or contact me on my phone numbers below in the video description. So thank you very much. Hope to see you guys soon. Bye bye.